One. Okay, we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sebastiano Tofaletti from the European Digital SME Alliance in Brussels. I'm here with friends and good experts who will help me go through this episode of Digital SME Live. The online event, the online conversation where we bring you to the hottest topics that are discussed in the digital arena regarding, in particular, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. Today, as you know, we will be talking about AI, artificial intelligence, in particular about the ethical aspect of AI. We all know, we hear a lot about that AI is a very promising technology, which might really change our, the way we live and even our industrial landscape. We have some predictions, at least I have one from McKinsey that says by 2030, we might have an increase by 13.5% points in the European GDP, thanks to the applications of artificial intelligence. That's quite a strong impact that this technology might have. But at the same time, of course, we have to take care of the trust of the people, the concerns that are there, because the ethical aspects of AI, so who controls the decisions, are there bias in the decisions that are made by robots, by artificial intelligence? Will this have consequences? Do we have to have a liability for such decisions if they have consequences on the health and safety of people, for instance, if they create discrimination? And so all this needs to be addressed by our European legislator, I believe. And indeed, we need to also make sure that our companies, especially our SMEs, are ready for whatever legislative framework we will have on AI. And we need to make sure that whatever policy, whatever legislative conditions, regulatory conditions we have, we make sure that this is conducive to SMEs being able to innovate, to stay on top of artificial intelligence, because only by doing so, Europe will be a winner in the digital revolution, and we will not be controlled or become just users of technology developed by others, by the US, the Silicon Valley, or by China. So we need to really stay on top of these technologies. So I'm here today with three very good speakers, very good experts. I have George Sharkov, who is advisor to the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense, and he has many other roles he will tell us more about later. Then I'm very glad to have Josianne Cutajar, who's a Maltese member of the European Parliament. So welcome, Josianne. And then finally, I have Gemma Galdon Clavell from Spain. Gemma works in an SME, and she is really she is also busy in research, but she comes from the business sector, and she is an expert in AI ethics. Maybe I will start with our political representative here, member of the European Parliament, Josianne Cutajar. You are also among really the youngest people who are in the European Parliament, one of the youngest members. So it's very good to have a person who comes from the newest generations and certainly understands digital technologies much better than our old politicians, and who might have certainly a vision also for the development of technology, the adoption of digital technologies in our European society, and so on. So, Josianne, perhaps if I start with you, what would be your definition actually? How would you, if you are speaking about artificial intelligence, what does it mean when we say Europe wants to have an ethical artificial intelligence, an ethical AI? What is your take on that?
We know, thank you, Sebastiano, first of all, for the introduction, and also to the organization for putting up this very important debate. And yes, when we refer to AI and the ethical aspect, I think that it's very important to focus on the ethical aspect. AI has a lot of benefits which we know of, but it also has a lot of risks. And sometimes there are those gray areas, those loopholes in the law, which only could be dealt with best if ethics are put in place. And therefore, it's essential that when we speak about AI, we also keep in mind practical scenarios of high-risk applications, of situations where there won't be a fixed rule of how we should deal with that particular circumstance, and ethics could solve it much better. I think that as a European Union and as a European continent, we could be protagonists in this field. We could also lead the way. So we speak about digital sovereignty, or better, digital leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that we could lead the way when it comes to ethics. In the European Parliament, we're constantly discussing AI and with relation to various fields, sector-specific fields such as transport, for example, and other fields where AI could be applied for our own benefit, including in the part of the health sector, where it could also be of a lot of benefits. And therefore, I think that when we speak about these issues, we have to keep in mind the ethical aspect always. It's always very interesting to discuss. There are circumstances where there is no clear right or wrong in it also. So yes, ethics have to be there. And whilst I believe that a certain amount of regulation is essential, whilst we're not speaking of over-regulation, but of balanced regulation, certain rules are essential. Ethics has always to remain in place. As in any other field, ethics has to be there to guide us in moments where situations are not clear-cut, defined by existing rules.
I know, Josianne, that you have been working a lot in the European Parliament, leading the work on AI, and in particular on the concept of liability for civil liability for AI. What does that mean? What are the ideas that you have been developing, and what do you expect to be the next decisions by the European Parliament in that respect?
Indeed. At the moment, I'm also a shadow rapporteur for the SND on a NINA report relating to the civil liability regime in AI. And I believe that this will be a very important piece, not only the report itself, but the legislation to follow. And I think we should have it in place the sooner the better. We know that we have liability in place for every other product and service. We have the Product Liability Directive, which has served us well so far. But we have to take into account the new developments in AI and make sure also that there are these developments reflected. At the moment, we're speaking of responsibility, of a civil liability regime. As I said, there are high-risk applications, and there's a discussion going on. Should we have an annex which guides us? Which are those high-risk applications? Should we have any other means to guide us through? Should we leave it up to the member states? But in this case, I believe that we have to have a new harmonized civil liability framework in place. The Product Liability Directive has served us well, but we need also to adapt it. And when we speak of having a civil liability framework in place, that is also very important to foster trust. Why foster trust? If we're having a regime where there are no rules in place, where there are a lot of fast advancements taking place, then it will be an issue of consumers being afraid to buy products with AI applications in them. And it could also mean that innovators, including SMEs, could be hesitant to innovate in this particular field because they don't know what the legal regime in place is. There could be dire consequences, and without a clear regime in place, it could also mean that this would keep back SMEs and other companies from innovating.
All right. Thank you, Josianne. I think that was clear. You introduced perhaps the concept of a trustworthy AI. You know, when you speak about trust by consumers in the AI they can find on the market. So let me maybe ask a question to Gemma Galdon, because you are an expert in AI ethics, but you are also an SME yourself. So you are a member of the business community. And so when we talk about trustworthy AI, do you see a way that this concept will bring competitive advantage to European companies, especially SMEs, maybe also in a global context?
Hi, thank you, Sebastiano, for the invite and for the session. I was really enjoying the contributions of Josianne, and I think that the civil liability framework is a really useful tool that we can use. And to answer your question, yes, ethics and trust is clearly a competitive advantage for European SMEs. We are an SME that is building space in the space created by the General Data Protection Regulation and by the other innovations in the field of regulating how to do tech in a better way. I think we've inherited a US way of doing technology, which is, you know, the motto of Silicon Valley: move fast and break things. And I think that in Europe we've realized that when you move fast and break things, sometimes what you break is important things. You break fundamental rights. You break rules that protect societies. So I think that Europe said we want to create something different, and through that, it's helped us, the business sector in the EU, also find the space in that arena. And now we are auditing algorithms, for instance, in the whole world, in all different continents. And coming from the EU is always seen as a label of trust. Because of that, because we come from an area that's been very active in regulating these things. But certainly the issue of trust is one that is really important for our clients. I think that initially when we're trying to talk about ethical AI and ethical technology and how it's important to do things well, how it's important to comply, compliance is important, but it doesn't move you. So what we found is that oftentimes our clients were more compelled to understanding that doing things well, that doing things ethically meant that you could build trust with your clients. And so instead of seeing your clients as these cheap resources for data, you could use data processes to build trust with them, and you could build that into your competitive advantage. And we're seeing that even in the US with some of the moves from big giants like Apple or Microsoft, saying in different moments, we want privacy and we want ethics to be our competitive advantage. Of course, we have a challenge there, I think, because saying that you are ethical is very easy, but doing ethical is very difficult. So how do we move from the discourse to practices? And I think that's what we have a duty to lead from Europe on what does it mean to be ethical? What does it mean to build trust through better technological processes? That's why one of the things that we're putting on the table is this algorithmic audits, but we're building lots of different resources to basically help people understand what does it mean to do things better, and what does it mean to do from the European perspective on technology, which I think is really important to put out there.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma. Perhaps what I understand is that you as a company, you really have, or trying to build a leadership also in these aspects. And this is what you are trying to offer, you know, other companies in Europe and elsewhere, perhaps. But certainly, you know, we have many more companies, many more SMEs that do not have your level of expertise, your level of, you know, being a leader in that field. So turning to George Sharkov, who is, you know, a very high-level expert in artificial intelligence and new technologies in general, because I know you for many years, George. So what would be then your suggestion? Because we need also to think about the large number of SMEs we have in Europe, and many of them want to do business with artificial intelligence, but they may not know how to establish that they are, they do work with ethics. So how can we help this? How can these companies be helped through the work the European Commission is doing? You are member of the high-level expert group of the European Commission on AI. You are a member of the standardization community in different bodies like ETSI. So what do you think we can really give in terms of concrete guidance to companies to make sure they are better, more competitive in the future, thanks to a trustworthy AI? You need to unmute yourself, perhaps, George, before you while you are thinking about how to answer the question.
Okay, that's the point with the touch screen. Yeah, thank you, Sebastiano. Hello, everybody. And okay, first a little comment. You said that I'm high-level expert. The membership of the high-level expert group doesn't make me high-level expert. A little joke. However, I would say that for 2 years, practically last week, that was more or less the end of the mandate of that group. For 2 years, we have been working more than 50 experts, plus a lot of contributors and observers from the Commission and other organizations on the so-called, that was the main mandate that we had, the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI. And the title itself is speaking, because what you said today about the title of this conversation, like ethical AI, my question or counter question would be, okay, is it possible to have non-ethical AI?
Good question. Okay.
The second thing is that as soon as we talk about ethical or ethics in AI, this is a proof that we live in a new era, in a new society, because with the boom of ICT, software, and other stuff coming from the 60s, or this digitization, we have been talking about the software, IT systems, information systems, and many other control management systems. But we never spoke about like ethical. The new artificial intelligence is coming somewhere. Ah, okay, there she is.
Yes, I have guests here. Hello.
He's curious to know about the little robots. Unfortunately,
yeah, of course they want to know about AI as well. They will be using it.
Yes, I will show it in a minute. Okay.
No, go ahead. Don't worry.
But the point is that we never spoke before that about the ethical software or ethical ICT system. So now we speak about ethical or ethics in AI. We have something new. So the AI systems, first, they are not only software or IT systems. This is not the full. This is changing really the society. So we're in a society where knowledge, first, for many years, we have been talking about knowledge-based economy. But now, with the AI tools, we can really make it. We can use it because knowledge is usually associated with the early ages of artificial intelligence, like 50s, and the title itself, and also the being able to reason or to make analysis and to make decisions, or at least propose decisions based on knowledge, not only on data, or interpreting knowledge with the data. And I think this is the revolution we live in. And therefore, we have to talk about ethics in two aspects. So one thing is how we design, how we make the systems so that they can, these AI-based systems and methods, algorithmics, and so on, so that they can prove to their customers or their partners, I would say, in the business, that they are trustworthy. So to build the trust is not just like the classical system. So you repeat many times, 1,000 times, and it gives you the same result. You make a lot of intensive tests, and it gives you positive results. So statistically, you think that your software and IT system is stable. With AI, first, you can never be sure because AI is evolving by interpreting new data, learning, continuous learning, which is not happening with the classical software and IT. So therefore, we have a partner, and this partner, we have to make sure that somehow by evolving or learning, we'll still keep some principles, we'll still keep exactly this fairness and transparency to us why these decisions are proposed or why some analysis conclusions are made and so on.
So George, is it even possible to design an ethical AI machine, or is it going to be out of control and we can only judge ex post when the unethical decision by the computer has been made? Then you can find somebody guilty and get reimbursed or something.
Well, that's the fun of it, because actually you can go back to the 3 laws of robotics from Dr. Susan Kelvin and Isaac Asimov, if you remember. So the basics of the ethical principles are there. However, the developers of AI systems, they have to make it in a program that still will foresee the new knowledge and learning that is coming in the future, and still be able to follow these principles, not harm people and so on, obey or put the human in the middle, or human oversight and so on. Those are the 7 areas. Actually, exactly this is the definition of the what we did with the high-level expert group. The 7 areas of the definition aspects, different aspects of the trustworthy AI. So some of them are really ethical, moral, and you will say, okay, designers or developers don't need to know them. No, you have to do it because by design, the AI should be trustworthy and support these ethical principles. How to support it technically? Well, be able to explain why a decision is made or proposed. Be able to explain why certain classification is done. Because now I come to the point, well, maybe there are more examples, but we will come back to that. Now, because you asked about the SMEs, so we have to know or to consider the fact that, first of all, the awareness of SMEs is like any normal citizen. I mean, these are robots like making funny things, and sometimes they could be useful. What they do as an advice or as a service. And the main areas that are already in place, it's happening. It's not in the future. It's not science fiction. There are a lot of artificial intelligence engines that are running in the field of customer relationship management. So know the profile of your customer. Kevin,
George, let's continue with that in a minute. Let me ask Gemma, because she wanted to intervene. Do you want to say something? I can ask you a question if you don't have any immediate comment on that.
No, I just wanted to maybe give an example that I find useful for people to understand what we're talking about when we talk about the ethics of AI. I use the example of the car, because cars have been around for a long time, but also there's been a lot of AI innovation around autonomous cars. So it's a technology that allows us to see how innovation happens. When cars were invented, we did not have anything to stop the speed of a car. We didn't have anything to limit the emissions of cars to the atmosphere. We didn't have red lights. We didn't have roads or places for people to walk through. All these we had to come up with over time. And in the overtime, a lot of people died. And the environment was put in a really bad place because it took us too long to decide all those things. So these are the ethics. That's how you build the social precautions that, yes, they limit technology, but today no one would buy a car without a speed limit. No one would sell a car without a speed limit. But also in the history of cars, there's been companies like, for instance, Volvo last century, when they invented seat belts, instead of patenting seat belts, they released the patent. And through that act of saying we don't want to profit out of the security of our users, they became identified with security in cars. So they did an act of focusing on ethics and security in this case, and they released it to the community as a way to get this competitive advantage. Now we're seeing with autonomous cars how apparently some of the car makers haven't learned from all that history. And so we're learning things. Some of the autonomous cars, when they go out in the road, not in Europe, luckily, but in California, through judicial court rulings, we found how the cars that are being used in real roads in the US, in their engineering, no one has planned that a human being can cross the road outside of a crossing. Yeah. And so there's one person already who's been killed because the system was not programmed to identify a human being outside of authorized spaces. Do we want these cars to get on European roads? And if not, how do we make sure that we that we ask those car makers to incorporate the social impact of their technologies in the process of developing those. So that's what ethics is. Ethics is about understanding that your technology, for all the good things that it can bring about, it will also have negative externalities. How do you mitigate for those negative externalities? And how do you win competitive advantage and more clients and more trust in that process?
Okay, but Gemma, sorry to continue on that, but where is the balance here? Because some people might also say, yeah, you know, despite all the, if you take the American examples of the car, the self-driving cars and so on, some people may say, yeah, but look, if you know the technology, you will understand. And if you apply autonomous cars, ultimately it is going to be, even with those issues that you mentioned, even with those accidents that are inevitable, you know, they happen, or they were evitable actually, but even with those evitable accidents, probably if everybody runs on an autonomous car, the roads are going to be much safer than what they are now, because altogether these computers, this machine will be, you know, behaving better than what we humans are behaving with the cars. So where is the right balance here between, you know, letting a new technology roll out and instead being careful about trust of the people and so on? Whereas, you know, is this even worth ultimately?
Maybe balance is not the best word. I think that you need to plan for what do you want to achieve. So you want to see automated cars because you are convinced that they will create safer roads. I'm convinced of that. I don't drive, so I cannot wait for autonomous cars to be here. Like,
you are a very good example then.
Yeah. But what I realize is that sometimes the how to put this in a nice way, the arrogance of the engineers sometimes in thinking, oh, because this technology is superior to other technologies, people just need to accept it. Well, people don't accept things because you want them to accept things. You need to work with them. You need to help them understand why this technology is better. And sometimes I fear that because of this arrogance in some sectors, because of this lack of willingness to work with people's concerns, some technologies that could improve society will not end up being successful, precisely because we've minimized the issue of social impact, because we haven't built a program, a plan to ensure that we arrive to a successful implementation of that technology. So I think that in a way, non-ethical technology is sabotaging innovation. The only way to move innovation forward is by doing it ethically, because otherwise people are going to turn their backs on technology. We're seeing that over and over again. People use technology all the time, but they don't like technology companies. They distrust the technologies that they use. If they had an alternative, they would use an alternative, but they just don't. So I think that we don't want to break that very important line of trust between users and citizens and the industry. And I fear that if we continue to do things in the way that some countries are doing them, we run the risk of breaking those lines of trust. And then innovation will be in serious trouble.
Like, Josianne, maybe because you are a member of the European Parliament, what do you think about this input by Gemma? Do you think, you know, really this concept of allowing a technology to be adopted thanks to an ethical framework is really the right approach? Is it what Europe is doing? What do you think from the European Parliament perspective about the work that is being done by the European Commission, which is, you know, the other arm of the European Union? Are you satisfied with their approach so far? Have they done enough, or should they do more? How would you comment on that?
It's good that the Commission also came forward with white papers and initiatives and proposals. And yes, there has been a step in the right direction. We need to step up when it comes to the timeline, I think, because AI is not the future, but it's the present. It's with us. And as I said, certain areas are essential to act upon as soon as possible, such as the civil liability regime. I agree with what Gemma was stating. So in my opinion, there should be a strong legal framework, which will be important to give legal certainty, but will also be important to boost consumer confidence, to boost innovators' confidence in this area. And let's look at trustworthiness, not only in the legal aspect and from the consumer's point of view, but also from the SME's point of view. Trustworthiness could help a lot in building up an attractive business model, and also in increasing the amount of users. And this, I think we should keep in mind, that having rules in place, it's not there to hamper innovation, it's not there to kill SMEs, but we should look at it as an innovation, as an opportunity, may I say, also in the right direction. And Gemma was speaking about some positive examples. I also refer, for example, to a legislative initiative by the European Parliament when it comes to GDPR. There were a lot of SMEs who were skeptical about GDPR, and a lot of businesses were skeptical because they thought it will harm them. But in reality, if you have balance between regulation and also taking into account the particular situation which SMEs are in, for example, and the particular situation of businesses, listening to stakeholders constantly, not only when drafting a particular piece of legislation, but I believe that constant consultation also with the business community is important all throughout, because as we innovate, as we go forward, there will be new circumstances which crop up every now and then. And I think it's important to have constant consultation, even from us as policymakers, not only with the consumer aspect, but also with the business aspect, and with the innovators, with the researchers, with the academics in the field. This is a very important aspect, to have a holistic approach to it, because as we were saying earlier on, there could be gray circumstances where this approach would help a lot in answering.
I would say, Josianne, that you, as a suggestion, that you will really need to do your best to speak a lot to SMEs, for one reason, because, consumers, it's very natural. They are very, even though they cannot pay, nobody can pay for a consumer representation. There is a lot of attention to consumers. They have a lot of bodies that represent well consumers. There is public subsidies for consumer representation. On the other hand, big companies, especially big tech, are extremely present, are lobbying very hard. They have a lot of resources. And who is in between is the SMEs, who are 99% of the companies, but they have no money and no intention to represent themselves. So we are an SME organization, but we are really an exception. And there are very, very few out there who exclusively represent SMEs. They don't have, big companies who actually put the money, and so they become the mouthpiece of this big tech or the other big tech. We are completely independent, but there are so few. And it's true. And it's very important that you in the European Parliament and your colleagues listen to these voices. But let me, please go ahead.
Add a bit to this also. I think that we need to take the opportunity of the upcoming Commission strategy and European Parliament strategy when it comes to SMEs, also the SME strategy in the European Union, to also take note of these challenges and how we can turn these upcoming and present opportunities into real opportunities for SMEs. I'm also, I feel what SMEs face as challenges. I'm also working on the SME strategy as the SND shadow rapporteur on behalf of the SND, and I'm also emphasizing a lot that when it comes to the digital aspect, we're speaking about the twin transition of environment and digital. When it comes to the digital aspect, we need to have a holistic plan to see to it that our SMEs benefit from the digital aspect and the digital opportunities that there are, including in the AI field. And I think that this is also a unique opportunity to push forward SMEs to become protagonists in the digital and AI field, and also to benefit truly and really from this aspect. Sorry, I stopped you there.
No, it's okay. I mean, I like very much what you just said. And going into the detail of that aspect, perhaps with George, because you also represent SMEs, you do represent SMEs in the AI high-level group of the Commission, for instance. What is your take? Where is the right balance? How to create a framework that lets SMEs innovate, incentivize them to try, not to be afraid, and to roll out new technologies, but at the same time create trust on new technologies. I mean, Josianne gave the example of the GDPR. She thinks this is a good example of where Europe has regulated something which is very contentious, like data protection, in a way which is overall good, even for SMEs. Do you agree with that, or what is your right approach in the case of AI? I mean, I know it's a difficult question, but somebody has to start.
Okay, I will start actually with the last example related to data. So you see, it's a typical example when we start talking about AI, first with the protection or restrictions. It is good to know that AI should obey these regulations about privacy and so on, but in general, the most critical, especially for SMEs, question is how to use data to train your AI. Because the main obstacle for SMEs, if we talk about the most popular machine learning platform, so we're not talking about most advanced reasoning systems and so on, but at the moment, the only available platform, AI as artificial intelligence as a service, is machine learning based.
Yes.
So if they don't have access to data to train their machine learning or their artificial intelligence, talking about the profiling of a customer, health systems or social systems or other things, whatever their business is, this means that they will not be able to train properly their engine, their assistant, I would say, AI assistant. So for me, the most critical question, and actually this is advantage for Europe, to be able to, based on the open data initiative previously, to be able to share data, especially trusted or validated training data in order to train properly the engines, talking about market health and other examples. So I think this is the balance, because at the same time, you have to be aware that you must keep the privacy. So a lot of health data are sensitive. And to train your engine, you need to sanitize the data, but then are they reliable or biased? You could train your engine in a improper way, I mean, in a wrong, biased way. So trusted open data. So I think this is the balance. So on one side, we have to share data and trusted data in order to use them. And on the other hand, we still have to keep the privacy and to be sure that data leaked from our artificial intelligence body will not harm people. So I think it goes hand in hand with the other requirements to the ICT systems, but it just put one level higher, because on the other hand, we depend on this data. Imagine health data, medical data that are used to train our engine. At a certain moment, part of this data, the owners of this data will say, okay, please forget me, to use the right to be forgotten.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't use my data.
I think, George, what is important to, in my opinion, what is always important to repeat, is that we are not, when we talk about machine learning, whether this is in health or care, for instance, okay, because you gave the example, we do not necessarily need to speak about personal data. We can very well train machines with anonymized data, which do not actually tell about the name or anything about any person in particular. And this is very important, because in the mind of many people, when we speak about data, they think about advertisement. They think about the Facebook or Google business model, which is all about personal data and advertisement, profiling, and so on. Whereas here we are talking about what I would call maybe more industrial applications, even of AI. And it's important to really clarify that I totally agree with you. We need to have trusted and open data, so good access to data, especially by SMEs, but this data do not need to be the personal data. That's another fight. And we need to fight that, by the way, with Google and Facebook, first of all. But let me get to Gemma. Do you have a view about what George said? What is the right approach? How do we make SMEs successful in this context?
Well, SMEs probably need more clarity. Like, I think that the EU has been very good at putting out their norms and high-level rules, but how do we make them practical? Yeah. What does it mean to be ethical? What does it mean to protect data? And here is where I think that companies like Eticas can play a role, and not only us, but I think we would need a sector of ethical AI in the EU for this to become like a mainstream thing in the market. But we need practical approaches. I always say that we are in the business of saying yes. So you want to use medical data, we'll find a way, but we'll find a way to do it legally, to do it well, and to do it ethically. And the law allows you to do that, but sometimes you need to anonymize. But as you were very correctly saying, for training AI, oftentimes you don't need personal data. You just need to anonymize it. But what we find in SMEs is that they don't know that. They think that they need all the data that they can gather, and we're like, we don't really need to do that. So we can help you anonymize that data. Or if you do need personal data, because sometimes you will need personal data, how do we create a governance model by which the personal data that you use, you have a governance structure that means that it's all that you always handle it respecting fundamental rights and the GDPR. And so we always find ways. I mean, the data is out there, it can be used. It just means that you need that extra, the added layer of ethics, data protection, and precaution. And I think that sometimes SMEs, and not the ones we work with, because the ones we work with are the ones that are aware that this is a problem. But oftentimes we get questions from SMEs that think that all these issues can be discarded easily. And that's not the case. If you are working with personal data of EU citizens, what you're managing is sensitive. What you're managing has a lot of value. So you need to do it with caution. Just like you manage the money from your customers with caution, right? You don't keep the money in a drawer in your office, you put it in a bank. And there are systems by which the bank knows exactly what's coming and what's gone out, because it is sensitive stuff. Money is sensitive. Data is not like money, but it is very similar in that it is sensitive. So if you want to manage people's data, you need to have precautions in place. And if you are an engineer, you have not been trained on that. Just like you've not been trained in commercial law. You know, SMEs need to get other people on board to make sure that they develop their capacity to the maximum. And I think that sometimes some SMEs find that difficult. They think that just, with a small team of 3-4 people, they can change the world. And you will have a much better chance at changing the world if you have a team of 10, 15, 20 people from different perspectives that can help you be the best at different angles of what it is that you are doing. And I definitely think that that's the key to success these days.
Gemma, it's interesting. Let me also ask you a question that comes from the audience, because we have had a lot of comments until now, but there is a specific question that I think you could try to dig into, which is, and it's from Karma Kachia. She's saying, what about gender balance in AI? As you are, I'm glad we have two ladies with us. AI works on existing data, so how can we teach AI engines with data to present gender balanced decisions? Is there a solution for that?
There's loads of solutions at different moments. You can, if you're aware that the data that you are getting from the real world is not perfect, if you are aware that your system will inherit biases that exist in the real world, you can mitigate for those biases at the very beginning. So you can make sure that you train your systems in understanding that there's a very specific data area that is not properly covered, and so you make up for that. So you can do that at the very beginning when you're designing your system or your problem. But if it's already working, we can also get in. That's what we do when we audit an algorithm. We look at the protected groups inside of the people that work or that are affected by your algorithm. We see how the algorithm is impacting on them, and we try to see whether there's any kind of bias and discrimination, not only because of gender. We're finding lots of different kinds of discrimination. Age is a big thing, a big discriminatory aspect in online, because older people and kids are underrepresented, of course. But that means that the AI does not have a vision of the world that is representative of the world. We're often asking engineers to solve social problems that they don't really understand. So how do we help them understand that the data that they're managing has all this implicit bias? And probably the gender bias is one of the most obvious ones, and one of the ones that we're suffering in a more clear way. Right now, people are using online searches to find jobs, and they're not aware that if you're a woman and your name isn't the name of a woman, the job offers that you will get will be different to those that you would get if you're a man. People are not aware that when you go to the bank and ask for credit or a credit card, if you're a woman, it's quite possible that the algorithm that will help the bank make that decision will have been programmed against you, because for some reason credit algorithms think that women don't repay loans, which is the opposite of what happens in real life. So we're seeing all these
Sorry,
functions.
Gemma. To interrupt you. On the other hand, I have the impression that the insurance companies calculate the annual price. I have the impression that it's higher if you are a man than if you are a woman. So the algorithm.
But that's an algorithmic. That's a policy decision that insurance companies make. What we are finding in algorithms used in making financial decisions and decisions on credit is that for some reason they're biased against women. Most probably because they have less data on women. So because we become a minority group, that is not that the AI model sees us as a minority group, not as the normal mainstream profile that they want to cater to. And so that's why
you are saying it's not a built-in bias, it's a bias that is created by the machine itself, because you are already in minority, and so it becomes even more marginal, so to say, in the algorithm itself.
Exactly. What happens with algorithms is that algorithms pick up bias in the world, but they make it worse. They amplify it. They not only reflect it, but they amplify it. So you can have the insurance sector, which is a sector that wants more women because we have less accidents objectively, but then the algorithm, because of the way that algorithms work, is that they want models. They want to find the rule, the mainstream, and that becomes the most valuable customer. And that's going to be men, because you have more data on men. So all of a sudden, this objective reality that we have from the real world is something that the algorithm doesn't know, because no one's trained the algorithm to know that. So these are the kind of things that we're finding. And again, it's very easy to solve this. It's very easy to train an algorithm not to discriminate against women. It's very easy to take bias out of the algorithm, but you need to do it. Someone needs to do it. Someone needs to realize that a crucial step in designing AI systems is to identify their social impact, to identify discrimination and bias, and to mitigate for it.
Would you like to say something on that, please?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Gemma, for the interesting input. Biases in AI, especially when it comes to gender, is something which I follow closely, because I think that data is biased because reality is biased. But in the case of data, as you said, you can not manipulate in the wrong sense, but manipulate in the positive sense to address the biases that there are. So yes, it's very important that at least we'll start. If the reality in real life is still biased, then we need to address that through education. When it comes to technology and AI and data, where we can technologically eliminate that bias or lessen that bias, it's important that we'll be active on it. And yes, we have to start from what you were saying, that we're aware that these biases exist for us to address them. I also wanted to link in a bit on what Gemma was saying, and what you were asking also, Sebastiano, about the digital skills of SMEs, because a lot of time we have SMEs which haven't got the resources, the knowledge, the skills when it comes to AI, data, cybersecurity. And yes, it's important to assist them in those specific aspects. And here I link into a very important debate, that of digital literacy and digital capacity. When we are speaking about SMEs and AI and ethics and other aspects, we have to keep in mind that we need to assist those SMEs to be equipped when it comes to digital capacity of the real infrastructure and digital skills. If they don't have the human resources themselves, because they don't have the resources to have specific people focused, human resources focused on AI, for example, we need also to see how we could assist them to have also backup support when it comes to that, even if they don't have employees directly with them. And over here, I wanted to speak a bit about the digital innovation hubs. I think that these could be also an important way forward. And I also welcome the fact that their role has been taken into consideration by the white paper. The knowledge in ICT is essential, and I think that the knowledge of these digital innovation hubs and also the ICT local ecosystems will be beneficial not only to support SMEs to build up their skills on AI, but also to monitor potential critics and potential small and medium firms, what they face as challenges in everyday life. So I think that these digital innovation hubs are a very important example and will have a very important role to assist our SMEs in this field. I also wanted to pass a positive comment on the collaboration which also you are doing as Digital SME Alliance with the European Commission's Joint Research Center. I think that it's important also to invest in research and in collaborations together, because we have to join forces to face this ongoing technological and developments also in the AI field. And the focus group on AI for Europe, I think, is a very good and important initiative which will help in this field. I also like the fact that you spoke about the issue of ICT standards. As we were saying earlier on, having standards and rules should not be looked at as a setback for SMEs, but as an opportunity to move forward and to turn challenges into opportunities. That's it from my end. Sorry, I jumped in a bit, but I wanted to emphasize the bit on digital literacy and capacity on addressing biases, including gender ones. And I think that these digital innovation hubs will be a real asset also for SMEs and assisting them also in the local ecosystem and the digital skills required.
No, and thank you very much, because I see that you are yourself very well prepared, even on the initiative of my own organization, the European Digital SME Alliance. So it's good to hear this type of comments and attention from an MEP. Okay, we are gearing towards the end of this live episode. So before we conclude, I'd like to give perhaps 1 minute to each of you to have your last say about the topic about ethical AI, especially what's in also for SMEs, because we let's not forget we are an SME association, so we need to keep the attention straight to that. So maybe I'll start with you, George. What's your final comment about ethical AI? What's the future in your opinion?
Well, let me think how to fit in 1 minute. But first, I wanted to say very quickly something about the gender diversity.
Yes, go ahead.
Complete the topic. Sorry.
This is your chance to speak about gender, because you have to represent the other 50%.
Well, okay, we are 50%. But now this reminds me the story why women always complain about cars and they have issues with the cars. And the conclusion is that the cars are designed by men. So the autonomy and all the design. And nothing is on the right place they expect. So it's another way of thinking. And I think we should avoid this in AI systems, like any software and other systems. But it's not only about the gender, but it was mentioned by Gemma about the age, about the race, and all the other ethical aspects of that. However, the story is that in the virtual space where our artificial intelligence will live, you cannot always identify neither the gender nor the age and other features of the customer or the data that you are talking. So you have to trust this data. And you remember, among the first problems of the Microsoft artificial intelligence being led to learning on Facebook or OpenAI, that it became racist, it became Nazi, neo-Nazi, and other things. 2 hours. So I stopped this one, but this comes to my major point, actually. So when we design and use the AI systems, we have to make sure that they follow certain requirements and standards. It is very good that Josianne mentioned about the ICT standardization.
ICT standards, yes.
AI on the top of ICT. So we should consider that AI systems are ICT systems on one hand, so they have to comply with all the standards, including cybersecurity, but not only, about the design, safety, robustness of the standard systems. On the other hand, we have on the top of this additional standards that are specifically applicable to AI, about the data, about the algorithms, about exactly this transparency, explainability, that will build the trust. And like any other industrial standards, they come normally bottom up. So what they require from the top, however, from the applications, what they require from the top is the legal framework and the common acceptance of the standards. The same like we have this ICT standardization rolling plan. Actually, there is a chapter there in the new plan about AI specific standards. And bodies like ENISA, the AI group, which is ad hoc group, and I'm a member of this on the securing AI.
You have just been selected as an expert in that group as well. So you have a lot of work to do.
The same standardization, the new standardization group in ETSI, which is securing AI. So we have to make sure that the standards will secure AI. So if the AI is compliant to that, will be technically robust.
Yeah.
And then the rest, ethical use. Okay.
I think you raise an important point, George, because indeed, we have a lot of, political directions from our policymakers and regulators, but this has to stay, inevitably high level. And then the work has to be done by those who develop concrete industry standards. And there is still a lot to be done in that respect, because we pretty much have no industry standard on AI, or very few. And so there is a lot of work to bring the policy recommendations, the policy guidelines to something concrete that is applicable by the real companies, especially by the SMEs. So Gemma, maybe also for you, another very last, the very last words before we conclude.
Right, thanks. I guess if I could talk to many SMEs, which is what I'm doing now, I'd acknowledge that having an SME is hard. Like I've been building one for 10 years, so I know it's difficult. You have a lot on your plate, and then for someone to come and say, "Listen, now ethics, there's this new thing, data protection, that you need to care about." It can be difficult. I also know that there are some bad actors there. We have had clients that have come to us after looking for help elsewhere, and they have been given really bad help. So I know that because it's a new space, it's difficult to navigate. So all my empathy to any company that's any SME that's trying to do things ethically and finding it hard. I understand, and they have all my sympathy, and that of a lot of people, I'm sure. But I would invite them, and I would invite my own sector to see ethics as an ally and an opportunity. Ethics is and can be a competitive advantage. It has been for us. Like we have offices in New York, in Colombia, in Spain. We are growing, and it is because we have something different to say, because what we bring to the table is not what everybody else is bringing. Yeah. I would also invite them to see ethics as something that solves things. What we are finding is that ethical technology and ethical business models are much better. Unethical technology is lazy technology at the end of the day. You haven't thought hard enough about all the issues and all the risks, and that's why you've come up with something that is unethical. So see ethics as an opportunity, as a risk assessment exercise, even a process by which you can identify some of the weak points in your business model or in your solution and address them at an early stage, which will always be a lot cheaper to do than if you do it later on. And also understand that ethics at the end makes your technology or your company better. I am convinced that in the future, unethical AI and unethical technology will be the same as what we feel when we now learn that cars at the beginning didn't have speed controls. Unthinkable. No one will want to buy or sell unethical AI. We are at a moment when it is important to be the Volvo of this world, to be the company that invests in ethics, that invests in social impact, and that puts forward the solutions, the things that will help society handle technological innovation better. So I think we're at a crucial turning point. I think that Europe is in a really good position to lead and to help the innovation ecosystem continue to lead in this space. But we probably need more specific mechanisms. We need more specific guidance. We need to come down from the very high level recommendations and actually say, this is what it means to be ethical. This is the seal of certification. This is the standard that we need to follow. We need to become a lot more practical because we need to move from principles and intentions to actual practices and solutions that are on the market.
Absolutely. I'm very glad, Gemma, that you conclude with this very positive note, with this, very good vision about the future of companies and people in Europe. Josianne, would you like also to say the very last words before we conclude this episode?
What I would like to conclude on is that let's keep in mind that AI should be human-centric, that AI should be there to work for us and not the other way around. And in this concept, ethics comes in a lot because ethics is there to ensure that AI and the technological developments are there for us. And when we say that AI should be human-centric, we are referring both to progress which is conducive to human development and also overseen by humans. Overseen by humans is essential also to avoid certain particular circumstances which could become extremely harmful and out of control. And yes, I think that it's important also in the discussion of responsibility and the civil liability framework to keep in mind that we should always foster trust, make sure that responsibility is traced back to a human or legal person. That would help businesses innovate. It would help consumers also have trust in buying such AI-induced products. Also, on another note, the research and innovation in this field is essential to continue, and collaboration is key, as we said before. And I would also love to conclude on a positive statement that let's keep in mind that Europe could be a protagonist, it could be the leader in ethical AI, it could use this to its own advantage, and our SMEs could also turn this into a great opportunity for them and be the real protagonists in this field. Thank you for this very interesting discussion, and hope we'll meet again in the near future.
Thank you, Josianne. I like the fact that you also want to conclude with a very positive note. So I hope we transfer all this enthusiasm to our viewers. With that, we conclude today's episode of Digital SME Live, Ethical AI, with speakers George Sharkov, Josianne Cutajar, Gemma Galdon Clavell. A recording of the live stream of today will be available on our website and our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you to the speakers and to all the viewers who watched the live discussion today. I'm Sebastiano Toffaletti. Goodbye.